So Pete asked me to talk about OpenStreetMap London, which is kind of a little group we have going where we meet up in the pub and talk about OpenStreetMap a lot. And so this is a talk where I try to persuade you to come to the pub with me. I don't mean later on today, we're going to do that anyway, right? But come to the pub with me more often. But I got slightly distracted as I was making the slide deck, and I realised actually OpenStreetMap started here in London. So way back in 2004, OpenStreetMap actually started. We celebrated the 10-year anniversary of OpenStreetMap last year. But it didn't really get going. There wasn't really a community until about 2006. So this is a screenshot in 2006 of a map that somebody rendered from a very, very early OpenStreetMap incarnation where people had started to map London. So if you can imagine a map of the world where London looks like this, obviously we weren't doing too well in the developing world at all, and basically it was a fairly useless map. But there was a lot of really early excitement around this idea of open mapping platform and the idea of creating a map from scratch and releasing it with an open license. And so, yeah, I mean, London, if you know it, should be crisscrossed by lots of little streets all over this map. And there's little sporadic patches where people have got excited about mapping their neighbourhood, and it just looks ridiculous. But this is the most ridiculously audacious thing to try and do: map the world and release the map with an open license. But this is where it all began here in London. And the idea back in the early days was very much focused on the ground surveying, so gathering data by seeing things with your own eyes. And a lot of it actually was based on this idea of GPS traces. So you take a cheap consumer GPS unit. A lot of people were buying these things and going, well, this is a fun gadget, but I don't really know what I'm going to do with it. So OpenStreetMap was a fun thing you could do with your GPS gadget. We caught a little kind of spider web of the street network, and you can see it starts to look like a map. But then you take that data and you turn it into a map within OpenStreetMap. But on the ground surveying comes in many forms, and we were sort of experimenting with different data collection techniques back in the early days. This idea of taking photos of everything as you walk around, or maybe with a dictaphone recording the names of the streets that you're seeing, that sort of thing. But it could be as simple as just taking a pen and paper and writing stuff down. That's really the most simple form of data collection for OpenStreetMap. And then a little bit later on, we got access to aerial imagery, photos taken from aeroplanes, and you can see this is here where we are in London, and it's probably quite a lot sharper and more sharper focus than the stuff that we've been looking at in Africa. But here in London, we've got special high resolution aerial imagery from Bing. But also there's satellite data, so I think across a lot of Africa we're dealing with satellite data. It's a bit more fuzzy. Obviously that revolutionises the process of creating a map. It's a lot easier if you've got a photo to look at. You can sort of trace around stuff in a casual kind of way. But we still have this idea of the on-the-ground mapping techniques as well, and a lot of data that we collected on the ground. And so actually here in London and in the rest of Europe, in a lot of places where people have been carefully gathering on-the-ground mapping data, we started to talk about this new thing, this thing of casually tracing stuff from aerial imagery, and we called it armchair mapping. And I think it's often used within the wider OpenStreetMap community in a slightly disparaging way. Actually, this is the lazy thing that people do. They sit in their armchairs and they click around there and they make a map. But just to be clear, this is exactly what we do with HOT all the time. So it's a quick way of making a map, and it's kind of the only way to make a map if you don't want to go to the place. So if you're mapping a Ebola-ridden Sierra Leone, you kind of want to do something a bit easier than actually go there. Armchair mapping. It's some people don't like it. Some people are more accepting of it. Within the humanitarian mapping, we're doing mostly armchair mapping, but trying to also move away from it to some extent. So in Lubumbashi, we're trying to get some on the ground stuff happening as well. So this is what I want to talk about. So here in London, we do on-the-ground mapping, and I do a lot of this. This is quite recently. I was in Ilford, kind of a grotty town centre in the east of London somewhere, and I took a photo of every single shop along the high street. And what you can see there is the JAWSM editor with the geo positions of every photo that I took. So it's basically a photo per shop. That's on my iPhone. I just use my iPhone to take lots of photos. The position, you can see it's meandering slightly. So the GPS from your iPhone is not actually that precise. It's not precise enough to take the point that the photo was taken at and put a marker there and say that's where the shop is. But it's precise enough to give you a rough idea of where you were when you were taking the photo. So that's kind of the mapping procedure that I follow a lot of the time. There's still this idea of people following their own procedures. So some people still use a dictaphone, some people still use pen and paper a lot more than I do. A lot of different mapping approaches. But the point is you go there, you see the world with your own eyes. Another thing I do a lot of is use this app called Go Map. It's an iPhone app. On Android, the equivalent is Vespucci. If you're an Android user, install Vespucci. iPhone, I recommend getting the Go Map app. And it's really just an editor, a lot like the ID editor, but running on your iPhone. So that's good because it means you can actually, while you're on location, you can say, oh, there's a cafe missing. I'm going to add the cafe. Type it in with your thumb. It's a bit slow. Click save, much like using the ID editor. You've contributed to OpenStreetMap there and then here in London. But you can just use a piece of paper, and it's important to remind people of this. So adding stuff to OpenStreetMap is really just a matter of remembering it somehow, and then when you get back to your computer, use the OpenStreetMap editor that we've all been learning how to use, contribute to OpenStreetMap.
And it's worth saying that in Lubumbashi, we use paper.
Yeah, so the field papers mapping workflow is all about that. I might have a slide on that. So what we get at the end of this process is this really glorious kind of map that's been created and owned by a lot of different people. So this is a map rendering showing different colours for different contributors, and you see it's this weird kind of splodgy map of different contributors in different areas. Some of the blotches are quite big, some of them are just tiny little patches that people have added. And I think this actually shows it better. This is one little baby icon per user. This is the overview of OpenStreetMap contributors map, OOC map. If you look it up on any particular part of OpenStreetMap, you can get a feel for all of the different contributors that are getting involved in that part of the map. And you can see there's a lot of them. Most of them are red. It means they haven't contributed that much. And this is important because it means you're just chipping in a little bit, and this is all we want. We just need people to map their neighbourhood, chip in a little bit to contribute. So this is kind of the key message I wanted to get across is we want people to do this thing of mapping their own neighbourhood. So we're teaching people here at the Missing Maps meetups how to map quite a large area of a city. You can do it quite quickly. You're clicking over the buildings, blatting in a big area by remote mapping. But have a go at mapping your own neighbourhood as well when you get home. It could be adding your favourite restaurant near where you live, or it could be something much more detailed like getting all of the cycle parking hoops in your neighbourhood added to OpenStreetMap, or all of the grit bins. It's coming around to grit bin season again, isn't it? So you need all of the grit bins mapped, which is it's a big job and it's very detailed, and so that there's no excuse that everything's mapped already. There's definitely something that's not mapped in OpenStreetMap in your neighbourhood. Like the shops, you can add the opening hours of the shops onto every shop, for example. There's a lot of detail you can put in if you really look for it. But why would you do this thing? Why would you essentially do what we pay a map surveyor to do? Well, we're trying to build an open licensed map of the world. And so the fundamental reason is this kind of slightly idealistic, slightly crazy idea of mapping the world from scratch, pretending that there are no existing maps. So yeah, it's an idealism thing. I don't know whether you buy into it fully without the humanitarian imperative, but that's why we're doing it. But there's a few other reasons as well, actually, for you guys, if you are just interested in the humanitarian side of things as well. It will give you a better feel for how to interpret aerial imagery. You know, if you go through this process in an area where you know it very well, where you know what the shape of that roof is, you know, you can start to get a feel for what stuff looks like from above. You'll start to understand tags better, so we don't use a wide variety of tags when especially for this kind of building mapping task that we've been doing today. We're just doing building. But OpenStreetMap has this whole wide variety of things that you can put into it, and a lot of that stuff is stuff that you would only know about if you see it with your own eyes. You go there on the ground and map something interesting. You mentioned the field papers thing, so I think we want to get more people to understand the on-the-ground mapping approach because it helps you to understand how field papers work. So if you've sent a team of people out to write stuff on pieces of paper in Lubumbashi, and all we get back is these pieces of paper, what does that mean? How do we translate that into tags? You're going to understand that process better if you have a go at mapping your own network. And I don't want to make any promises, but there's a few humanitarian organisations that are looking for skilled OpenStreetMappers, people who understand the process from end to end. They potentially send you on an amazing worldwide trip to do some mapping. So you know, that's what this kind of thing could lead up to. Having the skill to interpret stuff on the ground is crucial to that. Having the skill to understand how to use your devices, all the different surveying techniques. But I think probably another key reason is that I talked about the way that people regard the global community. People regard this idea of armchair mapping. If you have a go at mapping your own neighbourhood, you're very much joining the global community of OpenStreetMap. Thus, this is what the fundamental idea of OpenStreetMap is: to map your own neighbourhood, to map the world, release it for free, and it's really fun. You see the world in a different way when you start thinking of nodes and ways while you're walking down the high street. That's how I see the high street. While my wife's doing the shopping, I'm like, oh yeah, that's that tag, that's that tag. Takes a while to get into the mindset. And finally, the thing that you were asking me to talk about, it's a great excuse for going to the pub. So sort of join the mapping meetups. So I don't know if I actually got another slide. Oh yeah, we go to the pub a lot. Take a lot of photos, as you know already. So yeah, I've got a big collection of photos inside pubs, and you could be in one of those photos. We do also have a mapping evening. So we have during the summer, actually more than during the winter. This is in Brixton. Recently, we meet up just before going to the pub, maybe an hour beforehand, and try and show people how the mapping process goes. So a collective group mapping exercise, or we do a thing where we draw a cake diagram. You take a slice of the cake that you want to work in, different people mapping in different areas in the neighbourhood before going to the pub. So this is how you find out about it. The London page on the wiki is where I'm trying to maintain the list of events. You can see I do put the humanitarian events on there as well, so actually that is, as far as I'm concerned, that's the big list of events for OpenStreetMap. And the OSM London Twitter account, I'll try to put out the announcements on there. So that's it. Come to the pub with me sometime.
So what you guys are doing is the first stage of a process, and then the data goes to the field where local people take these field papers and take phones and they go and collect local data, and you can kind of get a taste of that by going to the mapping meetups and understanding the other part of the process, because this is just the first stage and the other part is equally as important. And that's
a bit different, obviously, mapping London.
It's a bit different mapping London to Lubumbashi, but you know, I'm not it's different.
What is you on the ground, just seeing the world? Yeah. This is the survey-based approach. Yeah.
And a couple of people who have been, you know, into OSM and doing that stuff have been to the field with MSF. Kieran, who's here, has been to Zimbabwe. Hi, Kieran. Karma has been to Bangladesh and worked with field papers with ISM Bangladesh, so have a chat with them if you want to about field mapping, about how it fits with this kind of physical mapping, and go to the London meetups. They're really good, and you get to actually do some physical mapping, so you're not in a basement, although there's not as much Prosecco.
During the winter we just go to the pub as well. The last time we were actually in the basement. Just to warn you, you might be in the basement.
You might be in the basement. So we've got the building till 9 o'clock, so continue please, and then please come to the pub with Harry. He obviously needs friends to go to the pub with, and yeah, thank you.